The room was heavy with silence before anything began. The U.S. Senate chamber, grand and historic, was filled with the quiet murmur of staffers. Senators adjusting their notes and cameras clicking into position. The lights above were brighter than usual because this wasn't just another debate. It was live, across every major network, and the nation was watching. Outside the Capitol, storm clouds were gathering both literally and politically. Hurricane Hecate had torn through the Gulf Coast weeks ago, devastating towns, flooding neighborhoods, and leaving thousands without homes. Billions in federal aid had been promised. But now, whispers of missing money were spreading. Money that never reached the people of Louisiana. Senator John Kennedy from Louisiana sat still, his hands folded calmly on the polished wood of his desk. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes were sharp. He had read every report, every audit, and he had one question on his mind. Where did the money go? Before he could rise to speak, Senator Elizabeth Warren's voice rang out, firm and sharp. Mr. President, before Senator Kennedy begins, I'd like to raise a concern regarding his ties to former relief advisor Matthew Rourke, she said, standing confidently. There are credible allegations suggesting Rourke's office signed off on large disbursements that were never received by Louisiana residents. Given their past connections, I ask, is Senator Kennedy prepared to explain? The air changed. Cameras zoomed in. Reporters scribbled faster. The live broadcast ticked upward in views. Senator Warren stood tall, arms crossed, her gaze fixed on Kennedy. Kennedy didn't look at her right away, took a slow breath, picked up a folder of documents, and stood with quiet precision. He looked around the chamber, not just at Warren, but at every senator, every lens watching him. Then, calmly, he said one sentence. Senator Warren, if you throw stones from a glass mansion, make sure your walls aren't built with broken promises. The room froze. No shouting, no immediate response, just silence. Warren's mouth opened. Slightly, but she said nothing. Kennedy didn't smile. He didn't raise his voice. He simply placed the folder down in front of him and continued. 3 weeks after Hurricane Hecate hit, $3.2 billion in emergency funds were approved. As of today, less than $500 million has reached my state. I have in my possession routing slips, bank hold notices, and names that do not come from Louisiana. He paused. In fact, he said, turning toward the clerk, I'd like to enter these into the congressional record. He lifted the folder again, holding it up just enough for the cameras to catch a glimpse of the label. Rourke, Warren & Co. Internal. Correspondence. Gasps echoed from the press box. Senator Schumer leaned toward his mic but hesitated. It was as if no one wanted to interrupt what was unfolding. Warren's eyes narrowed, but she didn't speak. Kennedy looked back toward her. If you're truly concerned about accountability, Senator, you'll welcome what I'm about to reveal. He flipped open the folder. On page 1, you'll see a memo dated for days after the hurricane. Signed by Matthew Rourke, yes, but addressed to 2 private equity firms linked to relief logistics. One of them, strangely enough, shares board members with a Massachusetts-based climate investment group you helped launch. Now Warren stepped forward. This is a smear tactic. Kennedy raised his hand gently, not in defiance, but to finish. I'm not accusing, he said. I'm asking the same question my voters are asking. Why did the money stop flowing once politics got involved? The chamber remained still. Outside, newsrooms scrambled. On Twitter, #Kennedy silences Warren was trending. CNN cut into regular programming with a banner, breaking Kennedy challenges Warren over missing hurricane funds. Inside the chamber, Kennedy closed the folder and sat down. Warren, now quiet, adjusted her microphone, but said nothing. Senator Booker finally spoke. We should allow Senator Kennedy to finish. The country deserves to hear. And so, for the first time in months, the nation watched as a debate in Washington turned into something Moran unraveling. Kennedy had not shouted. He had not accused blindly. He had simply opened a door. And on the other side, shadows were beginning to move. That night, journalists flooded the offices of FEMA and Treasury. Emails from whistleblowers began pouring in. And in the basement of a D.C. law firm, a man named Matthew Rourke turned off his phone and stared at a television screen. They weren't supposed to find that memo, he whispered, but they had. And now the real storm was only beginning. Outside the Senate chamber, the world was catching fire. Within minutes of Senator Kennedy's quiet but piercing confrontation, headlines were everywhere. Kennedy drops evidence in live hearing. Warren linked to missing aid firms. Storm relief scandal brewing. The public, especially in storm-ravaged Louisiana, was not just watching, they were demanding answers. But inside the Capitol, Senator Warren wasn't finished. She stood calmly at her podium. Her voice was steady, but the fire in her eyes told another story. "I find it deeply troubling," she said, "that instead of owning up to his office's failure to protect billions in disaster aid, Senator Kennedy has chosen to redirect blame without full transparency. If there are records, let's see them all uncensored, with names and dates." Her tone was careful, measured, but underneath there was pressure building. Kennedy, sitting now, didn't respond right away. He watched her, listened closely. Then he reached for a slim silver flash drive from his inner jacket pocket and handed it to the clerk. This drive contains unredacted emails between Rourke and various contract agents tied to disaster recovery. It also includes a spreadsheet showing diverted transfers to third-party holding accounts, some based in Delaware, others in the Cayman Islands. He paused. Senator Warren's name does not appear in these documents. However, her campaign donor list does share several executive names from the firms involved. The room buzzed, subtle but intense. Several senators shifted in their seats. Then came the interruption. A staffer rushed into the chamber and whispered into Senator Schumer's ear. He turned pale. "There's just been a leak," he announced. "A memo from the Treasury office has gone public. It shows an internal warning sent last month flagging that more than $2.1 billion in Hecate relief funds were improperly delayed or misallocated due to political risk concerns." Kennedy leaned forward slightly. "That confirms what I said an hour ago." Outside, the public was no longer patient. Protesters had already begun gathering outside FEMA's regional office in Baton Rouge. News vans pulled up as chants of "Where's our money?" echoed through the streets. Families still living in tents held up signs. Social media boiled, with footage of angry residents. In the Senate hearing, Senator Warren requested a recess. The chair agreed. But John Kennedy didn't leave. As others filed out, Kennedy turned to the C-SPAN mic, still recording, and addressed the American people. "I didn't come here to play political theater. I came to find out what happened to the money that was promised to my state money meant. For homes, hospitals, and hope." His voice grew firmer. "Maybe some people didn't expect these questions. Maybe they hoped no one would ask them. But I don't care who gets uncomfortable. My people are drowning, and someone is profiting. From their pain, the camera caught it all." The full speech was uploaded within seconds. Elsewhere in Washington, in a small room filled with surveillance monitors, a man named Aaron Bellin, analyst at the DOJ, watched the broadcast with narrowed eyes. He picked up a red folder on his desk titled Operation Riverbed Classified. Inside was a single page. It showed an offshore account opened 3 days after the disaster, funded in part by a firm called Cliffside Equity, one of Warren's top campaign donors. The name next to the transaction, Matt Rourke. Bell's phone buzzed. It was a secure message from his superior: "Send the Riverbed file to Patel." At that same moment, in a secure federal building, Kash Patel, now heading a bipartisan ethics oversight task force, received the encrypted file on his tablet. He scrolled quietly till he found the key detail: a wire transfer labeled Allocation Hold, Phase 2. With a timestamp hours before the first FEMA trucks even left D.C., he looked up at his assistant. "Get me Kennedy. Now." A mile. In her Senate office, Elizabeth Warren stood at the window overlooking the Capitol lawn. Her hands were clenched behind her back. She didn't speak as her chief of staff read off the headlines one by one. She didn't move when told that Treasury's Inspector General had called for a formal review. Finally, she asked one question. "How much of this do you think Kennedy actually knows?" The aide hesitated. "Enough to cause damage." Turned slowly. "Then we better find out what he doesn't know." But in a dark basement office in Alexandria, Virginia, Matthew Rourke was already preparing to vanish. He packed a bag, closed to burner phones, and stared at a computer screen with the words, "Operation Riverbed Compromised." He muttered to himself. This was supposed to stay buried, but nothing stays buried forever. Not in Washington. Not when storms leave trails, and not when a quiet senator from Louisiana decides he's done staying quiet. The next morning, the Capitol was tense. Cameras swarmed the marble steps. Protesters waved signs about the stolen relief funds. Journalists chased every senator entering the building, shouting questions about Operation Riverbed. Inside, Senator John Kennedy sat quietly in his office. He was reviewing an email just forwarded to him by Kash Patel's team. The subject line was chilling: "Confidential transaction, offshore phase 2. Cliffside Equity." Attached were account records, links to PAC contributions, and private communications from Matthew Rourke, his own former aide. Kennedy's aide. Sarah paced nearby. "Sir, if we go public with this, it'll hit Warren hard. But it'll hit you, too." Rourke worked under your nose. Kennedy didn't flinch. "If I let this sit, I'd be no better than the people who let Louisiana drown." At that moment, his phone rang. It was Patel. "We found more," Kash said without greeting. "There's a buried FEMA memo authorizing early funds to Cliffside Equity before the hurricane hit." Kennedy's eyes narrowed. "Before." Exactly. That means someone had insider knowledge of Hecate's path and used it to preposition contracts. This wasn't just negligence, it's insider disaster profiteering. Patel paused. "And Senator Warren's brother sits on the board of one of the subcontractors through a shell firm in Zurich." Kennedy exhaled slowly. The picture was growing darker. Meanwhile, in her office, 2 floors above, Elizabeth Warren was losing patience. Her legal counsel laid out the options: denial, deflection, or legal shielding. But Warren wanted something else. "Get me Kennedy's full donor history. I want everything on his former staff. I don't believe for one second that he didn't know what Rourke was doing." Crosstown, Matthew Rourke sat in a hotel near Dulles Airport. His bags were packed. He had a forged passport and a one-way ticket to Dubai. But before he could leave, his burner phone buzzed. Unknown number. He picked up. "You think you can just run, Matt?" The voice was Kash Patel. "You're not safe, and neither is what you're carrying. I have your Cayman login." "I know where the backup server is." Rourke's voice was hoarse. "You don't know anything." "Oh, I know enough," Patel replied calmly. "And the FBI is watching your hotel room right now." Click. Rourke pulled back the curtains slowly. Across the street, an unmarked SUV idled with 2 agents inside. He dropped the phone. In the Senate, the Ethics Committee convened an emergency session. Cameras weren't allowed, but leaks were immediate. Inside, Kennedy laid out the timeline of funds, names of offshore companies, and documentation of early payments to Cliffside Equity. Patel joined via secure feed, walking them through encrypted FEMA memos. When Warren entered, silence fell. She walked directly to her seat and looked Kennedy in the eye. "I hope," she said coolly, "you understand what you've done." Kennedy didn't blink. "I understand what you didn't stop." One committee member read from the Zurich Corporate Registry. Gerald Warren, known executive director, Clear Harvest Ag Parent Company of Cliffside's logistics contractor. Warren's face froze. My brother, she said slowly, has no political involvement. Maybe not, Kennedy replied. But he's still earning a fortune from our disaster. Outside the chamber, the press was already feeding on the leaks. Hashtags began trending. Hashtag Riverbed Scandal, hashtag Kennedy vs. Warren, hashtag Disaster Prophet. Then came the news bombshell. Rourke had been detained by federal agents at Dulles, and he was talking. That night, Kennedy returned to his Louisiana home to find neighbors waiting for him with tears in their eyes. People who had lost homes, schools, and hospitals. People who'd never believed Washington would listen. He stood on the porch and spoke simply. We may not have stopped the hurricane, but maybe now we'll stop the people who turned it into a business plan. At that moment, hundreds of miles away, Warren met with a crisis team. Her lawyers advised her to prepare for congressional censure, but she wasn't ready to give up. Rourke's statement isn't everything, she said firmly. If I fall, I'm not falling alone. Her aide leaned forward. Are you suggesting retaliation? Warren looked out the window, eyes burning with something fierce. I'm suggesting we expose his past too. Kennedy has skeletons, and I intend to find every single one of them. In a secretive room deep inside the DOJ, Patel received a file. One sentence stood out. 2017, Kennedy's office approved disaster contracts to firms later absorbed by Cliffside Equity. He leaned back. So it's not just her, he whispered. This wasn't over. No, the real storm was just beginning. The Capitol was cracking under pressure. By noon, headlines had shifted from Warren's family ties to a stunning revelation. Buried deep in a forgotten 2017 memo, it showed that John Kennedy's office had once approved emergency contracts. Contracts that later funneled money into Cliffside Equity, the very firm at the heart of the scandal. Suddenly, Kennedy was no longer just a whistleblower. He was part of the trail. In the basement of the Department of Justice, Kash Patel paced quietly beside an old corkboard covered in red string and printed invoices. This isn't just one senator, he muttered. It's the whole system. Aide entered with a flash drive. We decrypted the Rourke server. It's worse than we thought. There's a second phase Operation High Ridge. It links FEMA money to foreign firms, routed through European shell companies. Where? Kash asked. Vienna. Then Cyprus. Patel turned to Zurich. Patel turned pale. At the same time, Elizabeth Warren sat in a closed-door Senate Intelligence Subcommittee. She stared at the same document Patel had just seen, but to her it was salvation. This ties him to the same structure, she said. Cliffside wasn't just misused after the hurricane, it was built during his time. A Republican senator leaned forward. If Kennedy's hands are dirty, Warren, why didn't you say something earlier? Warren didn't blink. I didn't know. But now that I do, I'll say it all. Back in Louisiana, Kennedy was fielding reporters at a local press event. Someone asked directly about the 2017 contract. He didn't dodge. Yes, I signed off on recovery contracts. I believed those firms were legitimate. If they were absorbed later into Cliffside without my knowledge, then I was lied to. If I was part of it, I'll face it. But one journalist shouted from the back, then why did Rourke go to Zurich in 2018? The crowd hushed. Kennedy looked down. That trip wasn't public. How do you know about Zurich? He asked. An embassy cable was leaked. 4. Long moment. Kennedy said nothing. Then I was investigating irregular transfers. I wanted to stop them. But the mood had shifted. The smell of blood was in the water. That night on national television, a breaking special aired. From the bayou to the bank, did John Kennedy know? The anchor, a sharp-tongued former CIA analyst, laid out a devastating visual. Map graphics showed timelines, wire paths, contractor mergers. The name High Ridge glowed in red. Then, the final blow, a grainy photo of Kennedy stepping off a plane. In Vienna, shoulder to shoulder with a known financial lobbyist now under federal investigation. Social media went wild. Hashtag Kennedy Chirac trended within minutes. Kash Patel, watching from his secure office, clenched his jaw. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. "I wanted to clean house," he told his deputy. "Not burn it down." The deputy replied carefully. "But maybe it needs to burn first. This goes beyond Warren, beyond Kennedy. FEMA's been a funnel for years." Patel nodded. "Then we go deeper." In Warren's office, her tone changed. "We don't gloat. Not now. We keep pressing quietly." "Why quietly?" her aide asked. Warren held up a new file just handed to her by a friendly Pentagon contact. "This is why." Inside were photos of military-grade drones being tested over flooded Louisiana neighborhoods. Not FEMA equipment, not U.S.-made. Contracted from an Israeli tech firm with ties to Cliffside. Disaster zones were being used as weapons labs, she whispered. At that moment, Senator Kennedy received a private call. He answered in a quiet voice. "Speak." It was Rourke. "I have something," the former aide said. "Something nobody's seen. A recording. Zurich. The deal. Why are you telling me now?" "Because I'm not the only one running. And the other people, they kill." Kennedy looked at the portrait of his grandfather on the wall. "Then meet me," he said. "Tomorrow, midnight. No phones." That call would change the course of everything. Because the next morning, Rourke didn't show up, but the tape did. Wrapped in brown paper. No return address. Left outside Kennedy's door. He played it. The first voice was his own. The second was a deep foreign voice saying, "We don't just rebuild after storms, Senator. We invest before them." And then a third voice, undeniably Warren's, asking quietly, "How soon can the funds be redirected?" Kennedy stood. Still, his hands trembled. And for the first time since the hurricane, he felt afraid. Not of the scandal, but of how much higher this went. And how alone he now was. Senator John Kennedy sat alone in his townhouse office. The morning sun had not yet risen, but his eyes were wide open. The tape kept playing in his mind, the voices, the coded promises. The one question that echoed louder than the others: how soon can the funds be redirected? He knew that voice, Elizabeth Warren. And now he knew this wasn't just about bad accounting. This was premeditated, strategic. It was never just about disaster relief. It was about something bigger: planned profit from pain. Kennedy's instincts, sharpened by years in law and politics, kicked in. He picked up a secure line and called Kash Patel. "Meet me." No aides. No security. Library of Congress. Archive Room B3. Patel didn't hesitate. 30 minutes. When they met in the narrow, cold room beneath the stacks of legal records, Kennedy handed over the tape. Patel played it twice, eyes narrowing more each time. "She was in on it," Kennedy whispered, "before the storm ever hit." Patel nodded slowly, and not just her. "This third voice, we've heard it before. That's Armand Weiss, Swiss negotiator. Helped rewrite Puerto Rico's debt structure after Maria. He's not supposed to be involved in domestic policy." "He's not," Patel said grimly, "which is exactly the problem." While they spoke on Capitol Hill, Warren stood before the Senate Appropriations Committee and delivered a passionate speech. "For too long," she declared, "the people of this country have been manipulated by disaster profiteersmen who smile on camera and steal behind doors. The cameras loved it." Headlines popped within minutes. Senator demands full audit of FEMA spending, but as she stepped off the podium, her chief of staff showed her something on his tablet. "Ma'am, There's chatter on encrypted forums. Patel and Kennedy met off record. A file was transferred. Warren's face hardened. Which file? They're calling it the Zurich tape. For the first time, Warren looked rattled. Find out who leaked it. Back in New Orleans, a local journalist named Maya Harlan was already preparing her next special report. She had friends in federal forensics. They gave her what Kennedy and Patel hadn't yet seen: metadata from the Zurich recording. It wasn't just 3 people in that room, she said, staring at the spectrogram. There was a fourth voice. Very faint, but present. Her editor asked, "Do we know who?" "Not yet." But the pitch, the waveform, it matches one other voice print in the Homeland Security database. Whose? Maya turned her screen. General Miles Rittenhouse. The editor sat back, stunned. That's impossible. It's been off the radar for 3 years. Exactly, she whispered. And now he's back, in Zurich. Hours later, Kennedy's office received an anonymous package. Inside, a signed document from 2016. FEMA directive for 2 to be. Marked top secret, co-signed by Miles Rittenhouse and a then little-known senator, Elizabeth Warren. The directive authorized pre-disaster infrastructure investments in 5 U.S. states on the condition that contract access would be limited to pre-approved international partners. Kennedy looked at the signature. She was building this system before the storm even had a name. Patel was already dialing. We need to go public. But Kennedy hesitated. No, not yet. Why not? Because if we do, we lose control. Let me confront her, 1-on-1. That evening, as the Senate wrapped another heated session, Kennedy walked calmly across the chamber and approached Elizabeth Warren's desk. She looked up. Her eyes scanned his face for any sign of weakness. We need to talk, Kennedy said quietly. About what? About Zurich and Directive 4 to 2B. She froze. In her mind, years of planning, secrecy, and silent alliances started to shake. Still, she kept her voice steady. You don't want to go down this road, John. Oh, but I do, he said. She said nothing. The room around them was full of senators, laughing, chatting, pretending the world outside wasn't cracking. But in that moment, everything felt silent. Stood slowly and leaned close. You have no idea what you're stepping into? Kennedy smiled coldly. I've been in deeper swamps, Liz, but none smelled this rotten. Then he turned and walked away. The next morning at precisely 9 a.m., Kennedy was scheduled to appear on a major Sunday news show, Face the Nation. The host's first question: Senator, we've received unverified reports of a recording from Zurich involving you, Senator Warren, and a foreign banker. Is it true? Kennedy paused, looked into the camera, then said, yes, and America needs to hear it. He pulled out a USB stick. This is the beginning of a reckoning. And across the nation, millions leaned forward in their seats. The television broadcast cut to breaking news as Senator John Kennedy held up the USB drive. On screen, the words flashed in bold red. Kennedy to reveal secret Zurich recording, Senate collusion. The nation held its breath. Face the Nation's host leaned forward, adjusting his earpiece. Senator, are you saying that a sitting member of the U.S. Senate colluded with foreign actors before? Hurricane Hecate struck to manipulate federal. That's exactly what I'm saying, he continued. This isn't just about wasted money or missing aid. This is about a betrayal of the American people of Louisiana and of the law itself. A system was built in secret, far from Capitol Hill, and it involved international bankers, military figures, and yes, elected officials. The host blinked. Are you referring to Elizabeth Warren? Kennedy didn't answer directly. Instead, he leaned in, voice heavy. I'll let the tape speak for itself. He handed the USB drive to the production staff. Within minutes, the first clip aired. It began with a grainy recording of a voice Armand, wise discussing anticipated infrastructural collapse. Before the hurricane was even forecasted. Calm but calculated. As long as the optics are controlled and the contracts are locked, we'll move ahead. Louisiana will rebuild, but our channels must remain intact. Finally, a third voice, General Rittenhouse, spoke. If the DOJ audits this in 5 years, we'll be buried or retired. Either way, it won't matter. The recording ended. The studio was silent. Across the country, social media exploded. Hashtags like hashtag Zurich leaks, hashtag Warren tape, and hashtag disaster prophet began trending within minutes. In Boston, Warren's office slammed the door shut to reporters. Her press secretary issued a short statement. These are manipulated out of context. Recordings. Senator Warren has always acted in the best interest of the American people, but damage control wasn't enough. That night, a federal grand jury was convened behind closed doors. Subpoenas were prepared. Meanwhile, in New Orleans, protesters gathered outside a FEMA regional center. Some held signs that read, "Who sold us out?" and "No justice, no aid." Everything we have from the wire transfers to Zurich to FEMA's shadow files is in there, Patel said. It's ready for the Justice Department. Kennedy looked tired, but resolute. What about the fourth voice on the tape? Patel hesitated. It's confirmed. Voice print match came back this morning, 94% certainty. Kennedy leaned in. Patel continued. It's former Vice President Harmon Reed. He's been working quietly through defense lobbying firms since leaving office. He was the architect behind FEMA Directive 42-B Warren, just implemented it. Kennedy's hand curled into a fist. They built the whole damn machine. And now, Patel said, we tear it down. That evening, Elizabeth Warren held a surprise press conference on Capitol Hill. Her eyes were darker than usual, her voice lower. I have nothing to hide, she said firmly, and I will testify under oath. But let me be clear, this is a political hit job coordinated by men with ulterior motives. If we're talking about collusion, let's talk about Kash Patel and his direct pipeline to Donald Trump. A reporter shouted, "Are you saying the recordings are fake?" Warren didn't answer directly. I'm saying the truth doesn't live in a flash drive. It lives in due process. Meanwhile, Vice President Harmon Reed released a written statement denying any involvement with Zurich operations. But behind closed doors, officials inside the Department of Homeland Security were already preparing an arrest warrant. Across Washington, fear spread quietly. A power shift had begun. Reporters dug through old FEMA files. Senators double-checked their own past votes. Some deleted messages. Others began to flip. By midnight, a fourth recording surfaced, this one from a classified internal FEMA server. It wasn't leaked by Patel or Kennedy. It was anonymous. In the tape, Elizabeth Warren's voice said clearly, "We get one shot at this. Louisiana is broken. If we don't move the money now, Rourke will pull support." But he was the hidden name that ran through every FEMA deal, every dark fund. Rourke Global was a private energy conglomerate, and now their name was at the center of a federal conspiracy. Back in Kennedy's office, Patel looked up from his phone. They're calling a special session of the Senate Oversight Committee. You're being asked to testify. Kennedy didn't blink. The Senate Oversight Committee chamber was packed, reporters lining the back, cameras rolling, every senator present. It was the first time in over a decade that a live Senate testimony was being aired on all major news networks simultaneously. John Kennedy sat at the center table. His suit was neat, his hair combed. But there was something different in his eyes, a sharpness, a fury controlled only by duty. A single file rested before him. A black folder labeled Zurich Directive 42-B. Committee Chair, Senator Blumenthal. Open the session. Senator Kennedy, you've requested this hearing under Rule 14 to present evidence related to allegations against members of this body and others regarding the misuse of federal disaster relief funds. Please proceed. Kennedy took a sip of water, then stood. Ladies and gentlemen of the committee, he began. What I'm about to reveal doesn't just question one senator's conduct, it questions the entire system we've built. Hush fell over the room. He held up the folder. This contains evidence of pre-disaster planning meetings in Zurich, Switzerland, weeks before Hurricane Hecate was ever forecast. These meetings included foreign financial agents, defense contractors, and elected officials. They discussed how to reroute billions in federal aid through pre-approved companies. He paused. One of those voices was Senator Elizabeth Warren. Gasps echoed around the chamber. I do not say this lightly. I've served with Senator Warren for years. But the truth is bigger than loyalty, and justice cannot bend to rank. Kennedy opened the folder and removed printed transcripts. Here is FEMA Directive for 2 to be, co-signed in 2016 by former Vice President Harman Reid and Senator Warren. It gave international firms early access to U.S. disaster funds before any disaster had even occurred. He held it up to the cameras. This was not a failure. This was design. Elizabeth Warren sat silently across the room, flanked by her legal team. Her jaw was clenched, her knuckles white as she gripped her pen. Kennedy continued. 3 days ago, I received a 4th recording. In it, a conversation takes place between Warren, Reid, and Armand Weist, the Swiss negotiator involved, in Rourke Global's covert acquisitions. They reference Louisiana's vulnerabilities, end quote. If we don't move the money now, Rourke will pull support. The mention of Rourke hit the room like a thunderclap. Kennedy turned toward the committee members. Rourke Global is under active investigation by Interpol for disaster profiteering across 4 continents. They've funneled aid through shell firms, built unusable infrastructure, and left communities worse off. Now we know they were inside our own Senate. The room erupted, reporters shouting questions, committee members exchanging urgent whispers. Senator Warren finally stood. This is character assassination, she said coldly. None of what he's presented proves criminal intent. Kennedy looked at her. Intent, he said. You moved money before people lost their homes. You chose profit over preparation. And when I tried to ask questions, you tried to silence me with false accusations. Warren shot back. I tried to hold you accountable. You tried to deflect, he replied calmly. Because the deeper I dug, the closer I got to your deals. Then he added softly, and that's why you lost this room the moment I spoke. Warren stared at him. For a brief second, her lips trembled. Then she sat back down. Committee Chair Blumenthal cleared his throat. Senator Kennedy, will you submit these materials to the Justice Department? I already have, Kennedy replied. Just then, a staffer rushed in and handed a note to the chair. He read it, blinked, then looked up slowly. We've just been informed that the Department of Justice has issued a sealed indictment for former Vice President Harman Reid and an arrest warrant for Armand Weist. Both were intercepted at a private airstrip outside Brussels. The room gasped again, and as of 10 minutes ago, he added, Elizabeth Warren is under formal federal investigation. Warren closed, her eyes outside. The news broke live. Former VP and foreign operative arrested, senator under investigation across Louisiana. People wept, some in pain, some in relief. For the first time, the betrayal felt acknowledged. The lies had names. The hidden deals had daylight. Later that evening, John Kennedy walked along the reflecting pool near the Lincoln Memorial. Kash Patel joined him, hands in pockets. You did it, Patel said. No, Kennedy said softly. We just started something. Truth doesn't fix things overnight. They stopped. Patel looked out at the water. You think she'll be convicted? Kennedy's voice was calm. I think she'll be remembered. And not for what she planned, but for what she tried to bury. Patel nodded. And what about you? Kennedy turned toward the Capitol dome in the distance. I've still got a job to do. The wind picked up. Flashbulbs burst in the distance as cameras continued to chase headlines. But Kennedy didn't look back, because for the first time in a long time, the truth had spoken louder than politics. And Washington, for once, had listened.